Welcome, welcome, everybody. Claire Wasserman here, founder and author of Ladies Get Paid. We are an educational platform, global community, and a book that is all about helping women earn more and live better. And if you've been following along for the past now maybe 2 months, I've been going live every single day, the same time, to share a lesson. But after a while, it got quite lonely and boring to be by myself. And again, in our mission of helping women earn more and live better, we thought, how wonderful would it be to invite different coaches on to talk about how they also share that mission and get them paid too, right? And so today I'm really excited to welcome Alexis Haselberger, who is a time management and productivity coach. I'm going to just give a little intro to her, and then we'll dive right into the area that she wanted to focus on today, which is about why hustle culture can be so toxic and how to really learn to use your time in accordance with your own goals and values. But for Alexis, she does her work in a variety of ways. Some of it's one-on-one coaching, some of it's group coaching, other times it's corporate training. And this is how she explained it. Her pragmatic yet fun approach, I want to hear more about that, helps people easily integrate practical, realistic strategies into their lives so they can do more of what they want and less of what they don't. That sounds wonderful to me. So Alexis, A, thank you so much for joining. And B, are you a naturally inclined to be a time management kind of person, or was you doing this for a living because you went through your own sort of like agita and strife of learning how to manage time and energy properly?
So great question. And first, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to have this conversation. So at some level, I was always really cognizant of ROI on my own time, right? Like I was always a kid who was making a schedule and trying to figure out I could only watch 30 minutes of TV a day. And so what is the best 30 minutes of TV that I can watch? And I was making deals with my teachers about how can I go to class? My goal in school was always, how can I go to class as little as possible and still get straight A's, right? So I was always making deals and kind of really cognizant of my own time. But I also really struggle with a lot of things. And so I have a terrible memory. If things are not broken down, I can't, it's hard for me to conceptualize something that's really big and I need to break it down. And so I was good at this stuff because I needed to be. And I learned in my early 40s that I have ADHD. So it was one of those things where, it's a lifetime of coping skills that got me really good at this stuff. And that also provides me with a really, I think, good window into helping other people, because it's not like I've been good at it because I was good at it. I've been good at it because I had to, because I had other issues that made it necessary for me to be so.
I did not know that about you. And I love that I asked that because I do find the things that I've really honed in my life have come because of I'll just say a deficit, like a setback or, a quote weakness or challenge of some sort. Okay, so I know, for all the coaches who come on, I ask them, hey, listen, you pick the topic. So you tell me what's most exciting or resonant for you. And you responded, you wanted to talk about the toxicity of quote hustle culture. And then how do we really get in touch with our goals and values and then align our time, and our effort and energy with that. So why did you pick that topic? And I'd also love to hear your thoughts about how the pandemic maybe has shifted some things around that topic.
Yeah, of course. So I picked this topic because I think that, I kind of hate the title productivity coach, right?
That's interesting.
Because people, but it's what people search for to get the kind of work and help that they need, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason I hate it is because the idea when you hear productivity coach is this very bro-y, we're going to track things all the time. We're going to eke the most out of every single moment. We're always going to be doing something productive. We're never going to sleep. We're going to get up at 5 a.m. And right. I just think all of that is BS. I don't think that is a fulfilling life for most people. And so I think that when people hear productivity coach, that's what they think of. But I feel what I do and what I work with people on is a very different set of skills also around time. And the set of skills that I work with people on is how do you make sure that most of your time feels good, right? how do you end every day feeling like, yeah, I did more of the things that I did were important than the things that I didn't do, right? Like the things that I did were more important than the things I didn't do. And I consciously chose the things that I did. And I feel okay about the fact that I didn't do these other things because I chose things that were more important. And because I know what's important to me, what my goals are and what my values are, I feel comfortable making those hard choices because I think the thing is, like, every single person I would say who starts to work with me or comes to, not every single person, but comes to me with this kind of idea that somehow there's this magic bullet where they're going to be able to figure out how to get it all done.
Right.
And the reality is none of us are going to get it all done. I'm not going to get it all done. You're not going to get it all done. Every single one of us is all going to die with a big long list of things we did not do, right? It's just true. And so the goal is not figure out how to do all the things. The goal is figure out how to use your time in a way that feels good every day.
Right. Okay. This is so good. I love this. You're going to tie with a long list. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's morbid maybe, but like also if we were never striving, if we never had to make choices, life wouldn't be very interesting. I don't know. Right.
Right. Before we get into the how do we actually do this,
yeah.
I'm curious, why does productivity and quote life hacking, why does all that feel so broy? And by the way, not just feel broy, it is broy. When you Google this stuff, the kinds of YouTube videos that are out there and the quote thought leaders who are discussing this stuff, I do find are really male. And I have some thoughts on it, but I am curious for you. I'm sure you've, pondered that. What is that about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly like capitalism. It's partly like American culture. I think there's like this, I mean, I think there's this sense of like doing more means productive. And I just don't think, like, my definition of productivity is doing what I intended to do.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I intended to write a blog post today and I do that, that was productive. If I intended to read a book in the hammock with a beer, that is also productive because I'm making choices around that. Right. And so I think that I don't exactly know what it is, but there's something about like, I have to be the best, be masculine, do all the things, like do all this stuff that turns it into this kind of toxic bro-y thing. And also, I don't want to overly genderize or generalize things, but the way that our culture works is that often, at least in like, in heterosexual relationships and things, like women are doing a lot more of the things, right? And so there's more on their plate, there's more to juggle. And so I think that there's just this knowledge that like we're having to make choices that are harder. And maybe there's this, I think back to like throwbacks of 1950s, like, okay, like somebody's going out and making the money and like they're doing the productive things. And then like everything else is devalued, even though it's maybe double the work, right? That was not a very coherent answer to that, but those are my thoughts.
No, I think those are great answers. I'll just add on to that before we get into the practical tips. Yeah. I also think, and I'll speak for myself, that there might be some guilt around shortcuts. Because I even see that with ChatGPT. We've been doing a ton of guides on how to utilize ChatGPT to make your life easier, to make your work easier. And even in, helping to summarize maybe a transcript for a LinkedIn post, I have this intense guilt of like, I didn't do the work, or I have some sort of unfair advantage. Like, so I think there's something there. It can probably be extrapolated across a lot of different avenues. But to get into the practical tips, where would somebody start if they're coming to you feeling totally overwhelmed? First, they maybe have kind of a misunderstanding of what productivity is. You've now defined it in a really awesome way around intentionality. But I'm like, I have a never-ending to-do list.
Yeah, everyone does.
1, 2, and 3. Like, where would we begin if you were to coach me?
So here's what we do, what I kind of take everyone through, right? So we start from a position of two things. One, knowing yourself better exactly as you are. So there are a number of different traits, tendencies, scales, et cetera, that I have found have something to do with how we get things done. And knowing what those are, where you fall on these scales, helps us to say, oh, well, like this is likelier to work for you, and this is less likely to work for you. Because, all of us, we can kind of force ourselves into a box for some short amount of time, but eventually we all pop back, right? And so we want to build habits and strategies around who we actually are so that we don't feel that friction, all the time, right? So that we don't feel that guilt of like, and it's like, I am a night person. Waking up has been the hardest part of my day since I was 5 years old. It is still not easy for me. Like I have kids, I get up early, but like now I take a nap between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m. because like it feels better for me because my body really wants to sleep till 10, right? And so I reject the idea that everyone needs to wake up early and get stuff done, right? So there's just a lot of things like that. And then we start also with a time tracking exercise. So I ask everyone I work with to try to track their time with no judgment, like try to reserve judgment for a whole week, just from the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed, what's happening. And then we ask some questions around that. Questions like, what was surprising to you, right? What do you want to be doing more of? What do you want to be doing less of? What's like a goal that you have that you didn't spend any time on at all, right? What are some of these questions that we can ask so we can get a baseline?
And by the way, I keep muting my mic because there's, of course, a dump truck that has decided to, post up right outside. Do you find that people are surprised where their time is going?
All the time, right? Yeah. I think that, every once in a while I'll have someone who's like, that was pretty much what I thought. But people are super surprised by things. I mean, and super surprised in multiple directions, right? So one time I was working with a tech exec at, one of the big tech companies, and he found that he was spending 4 hours a day on Reddit and YouTube in 2-minute chunks. Just like he thought it was a lot, but he thought it was like an hour, and it was like 4 hours a day, right? I was working with someone once who we looked at her time and we were like, wow, you're spending like 2.5 hours a day driving your husband around. Right. And it's like, you know what? He could take the bus. Right. He could take Muni. I have also had people have like really pleasant surprises. So I was once working with someone who he thought he just like didn't spend a lot of time with his kids. And when he tracked it, he found that he was spending about 3 times as much time with his kids as he thought. And it's because time is subjective, right? When we're doing stuff that's not enjoyable, it drags forever. And when we're doing stuff that's fun and when we're in the moment, it goes really quickly. And so that skews our ability to actually perceive our time accurately.
Yeah, I find it really fascinating how skewed our relationship with time is, which maybe is another way of saying our relationship with ourself, because that is our life. Where we spend our life, where we spend our time is where we spend our life. So for somebody who then looks at their hours, they go, okay, this is not how I want to be spending my time, but it's what came naturally to me, or it's I'm forced to do because I have external circumstances. What would be some of the first steps to begin, I guess, adjusting or experimenting with a different way of looking?
I'm going to take you kind of through the arc that I take people through really briefly, because I don't want to spend all our time doing this. So after we do that level setting, then we move into task management. And task management, to me, project management, it's the same as time management, because you just said it exactly. Like, how we do anything is how we do everything. And the time, like how we spend our time is what we're doing, and the tasks are what we're doing. So we can use task to mean anything. It's something we have to do, something we think we have to do, something we think we should do, something we want to do, open questions that are taking, stock in our mind. It's all of those things. And we build a single trusted system for that, right? So this could be anything. It could be an app. It could be a spreadsheet. It could be, it could be anything. I definitely recommend an app for this. I think it's a little easier to keep everything all in one place. But we build something where we take everything out of our brain, and we also take it from all of the other places where, if you've got a pad of paper on your desk and you've also got Post-it notes and you're also using Asana, and yep, exactly. And you also, have a OneNote doc, and you also have Evernote too, and you've got reminders on your phone, and we're going to consolidate everything to one place, so that we can actually see what there is that we're working with and start to make some decisions around it, right? Then we start prioritizing. And so for me, priority does not mean like high, medium, and low. It's when are we going to do the things, or are we going to do the things, right? And so a big part of this is like learning how to say no, learning how to extract yourself from stuff that you said yes to already, but don't want to do anymore, and learning how to do that without feeling like a jerk, and still maintaining, being in everyone's good graces, and learning how to prioritize, like I said, so that we are really starting to plan, which is the next piece, is planning for the time that we actually have available, instead of the time we wish we had. Like most of us are just like opportunistic plan. Like, yes, I hope to get these 35 things done today.
Right.
Instead of actually being like, well, I have 5 hours of meetings and I have to pick up my kids at 5 and I have to eat and also go to the bathroom and, just do some other things. So I probably actually have an hour of work time. What am I going to do that's going to move the needle the most in that amount of time? Right. So we start to use planning processes, really low effort, high reward planning processes. We move into our tools. So we're talking email, calendar audits. Are we spending our time in the right places? How do we start to extract ourselves from all these meetings that are a total waste of our time? We get to inbox zero on all of our different things and have a way to stay there. That doesn't mean spending all of our time in email and Slack, et cetera. We move into habits. So it's like habit building without motivation and willpower as our sole force multipliers, right?
Because about that, if you could talk about that, because that is a big misconception that people feel like if I just had more willpower, or they make this like declarative statement of of who they are, like, oh, well, I just don't have willpower.
Right. And I mean, you're right. Like willpower and motivation, these are really fraught concepts, right? Because willpower is a fleeting resource that decreases as the day goes on. And motivation, people often think they need the motivation to do something to do it. But what science and research shows is that actually action begets motivation. So doing the thing gives you the motivation to continue doing the thing, right? And so I teach a lot of like science-backed strategies for helping us build habits that don't require endless motivation or willpower, right?
And same thing for confidence, right?
Yeah.
To feel confident, to take the action, and it's the opposite. Take the action, and that will get the confidence.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like I mean, I am not a therapist, but I often tell people it's like we're CBTing our way to good habits, right? It's like we have to convince ourselves that it's okay and nothing bad will happen, and we can only do that by trying.
Yeah. I love that. So in going back to the focus of our conversation of learning to use your time in accordance with your own goals and values, I'm sure you have a whole process for helping people figure out what their goals and values are. Do you want to maybe touch on a little bit of that, or
So I would say like we don't have a huge lengthy process on this when I work with people, because actually I find that a lot of times the people that I work with are pretty clear on their values. And on their goals. And if they're not clear on them, the time data makes it super clear, because people have a visceral reaction to things, right? It's like, ooh, like I'm doing so much of that. I'm like, okay, great. What does that mean for you? Like, why are you having this reaction to this? Right. And so I find certainly like if they don't know where they're coming from, I have tools and resources we can use to do that. And I have a lot of like goal setting, brainstorm types of things like that. But I often find that one of the issues is people have too many goals going on at one time, right? And I always think of this like reading a book, right? It's like, let's say you have time to read 25 pages a day, and that's a lot for a lot of people, right? Like, let's just say you have time to read 25 pages of a book a day. What's going to feel better to you? If you have 5 different books going and you read 5 pages of each every day, and then in 6 months you finish them all, or if you do them kind of sequentially so that every couple of weeks you're finishing a book, right? And this is how I think about goals. So it's not that we can only have one at a time, but when we spread ourselves too thin, we actually become very demotivated because things are taking too long. We can't see any progress. And we are just, we're bifurcating our efforts here, right? And so I also, work with people to say, hey, we're not going to let go of those things. We're going to keep them over in our system here. They're going to be in like a someday maybe zone. And as we complete things, we are going to go back to the pile. And so I think that can be really helpful too for people to see like, oh, I had all these ideas and they were here, but there's a bunch of ideas in this category that I never seem to want to pull from. Maybe you don't actually care about that thing,
I always find that kind of shocking and this goes back to something I mentioned earlier of, understanding where your time is going is understanding who you are. And this is an exercise in like self and identity. And what do you find that people have a disconnect with what they think they want? And then recognize maybe it's more of like what they think they should want, or any of those like aha moments of, gosh, my subconscious is really telling me something different here, and what that experience has been, as you've witnessed people go through it.
Yeah, I think there's an awful lot of shoulds happening, right? It's like we get them from all sorts of places. It's like maybe, we think that like, oh, because our mother kept a super clean house 100% of the time, that like, and did it all herself and didn't hire a house cleaner, that like that's on. I mean, my sister-in-law is kind of like this, right? It's like, it's like won't hire a house cleaner, even though that would actually alleviate a lot of stress to do that. Like, what's the value of holding on to these shoulds that somebody else wants? So I think there's a lot of that, and a lot of like, okay, why do I think I should be doing this thing? Where does that come from? And can I change that narrative, right? Can I say like, you know what? Maybe somebody else thinks I should be doing that thing, but I want to do this thing, right? And I want people to focus more on the things they want to do, because when we can shut out those other voices, then we're happier, right? Like when we shut out the voices of like, oh, you should be doing this, your house should be cleaner, your kids should be wearing matching socks, like I'm always thinking about, done is better than perfect. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like, what is good enough in every scenario? Because those things are vastly different in different scenarios. And so if we focus our limited resources on the stuff that actually matters to us, not to other people, then we're going to feel a better sense of alignment. And we'll also probably realize in the process that nobody else is ever thinking about us, and they aren't really judging us at all, because nobody is thinking about us. They're only thinking about themselves.
Correct. Yes. And I always love a good success story. So do you have any clients that you can think of that you'd be able to share, either a piece of, or their whole journey came to you with a certain challenge, and then you kind of got them to a different place and what they realized about themselves?
Yeah, I have many, but I can share one recently from my group program. I run a group program twice a year, and it's a 10-week program. We go through, all of the stuff and more that we talked about. And I had one woman who finished recently, and, our final call, we're always going around and, sharing what we got out of the program, like where our successes are. And she said, 10 weeks ago when this program started, I wrote down 10 goals, which honestly I tell people write down like 3 or less goals, but she wrote down 10 goals, right? And she said, it's 10 weeks later, and I have knocked every single goal off of my list. And these goals were: don't feel like I'm drowning anymore. Stop working on nights and weekends, right? Be communicative about the things that I am doing and I'm not doing. Like there's a whole, I can't remember all of them, but she also said that her manager had come to her and said, hey, I've been meaning to ask you for several weeks, how are you doing this? Like, how are you on top of everything? And so for me, that's always like when other people are actually noticing, like someone has made a huge difference in their life and how they're approaching the world. To me, that's always a really good sign. And also she crushed all her goals, right? And I've had similar stories. I remember my very first one-on-one client, he said something similar. He said he was also, tech executive, to one of the giant tech companies. And he said something similar. My HR person came to me and said, how are you so much more on top of it than all the other senior directors here, right, at your level? And he was like, oh, it's just this class I've been doing. And my client in the group program, she said, I've just been calling it my get your shit together class.
Yeah. Well, his response should be, and how about a raise?
Right. No kidding. Everyone's, yes. Bringing it back to ladies get paid.
Right. Procrastination. I have to ask you about that because that's a hot topic. Lots of people need help around that. What are some suggestions? I mean, I know you've touched on kind of rethinking willpower and motivation, et cetera, but I'm sure you have some tips you can give for folks.
Yeah. So we have, and I actually have a free resource that you're welcome to share out to people if you want to, about 9 ways to reduce procrastination without relying on willpower and motivation. And so I can send that to you, but I think that the number one thing, just given the limited time we have here today, is break things down. Like most people procrastinate on two types of things that are big, scary, amorphous, right? Or things that are emotional blockers to something, right? And so with either one, if we can break it down and say, what is the smallest next action we can take to move this thing forward, then it doesn't become so scary. We're essentially turning it all into low-hanging fruit, right? Like we love to do the things that give us little dopamine, check it off, right? But when you're like, I have to put together this big, PDF on how to use ChatGPT for LinkedIn or whatever, you're like, oh, I don't have time. That's going to take me 6 hours. I don't have time for that right now. And then so you're like, oh, I'll do it next week. I'll do it next week. I'll do it next week. And if we break it down and said, you know what, all I have to do first is I just need to open the document on Canva, right? Or like, next thing I need to do is write a title. That may seem silly to break it down that far, but sometimes when we're deeply procrastinating on something, that's what we need to do.
Awesome. Oh, and I wanted to ask you about, because we talked about it right before we jumped on, when I said, how are you spending your time? Given like the variety of different ways that you coach people. And you mentioned, you didn't use the word batch tasking, I did, but you really categorize or theme your days. And I do as well, or I try to. So I would love if you could give an example of how you break down your week. I think that might be that might inspire some folks.
Yeah, I'm totally happy to do this. So I will also say that this is always a work in progress. I review my schedule every 3 months to make micro adjustments to make it better for me. And so what my current iteration is Mondays are reserved for deep work. It's no meeting Mondays. I do not take meetings on Mondays. Maybe a rare exception twice a year, but other than that, nothing. I write on that day. I produce content on that day. I write curriculum for my online courses on those days. Like that is deep focus day. Tuesday.
Hold on. Another quick question. Are you also batch tasking or sort of like energy categorizing your day as well of when you do your work? And then do you put it into your calendar?
Yep. I batch process everything. So like to the extent that I can. And then I also use time blocking on my calendar because I am a big fan of separating the planning from the doing so that I just show up and I work through it. If something comes up that's unexpected or urgent or whatever, I have a plan that I can be like, okay, yep, this thing actually should move everything I'm supposed to do today. Or no, even though this is coming from a squeaky wheel, it needs to be pushed back, right? So I do use calendar blocking and time blocking. And then Tuesday through Thursday are my client days. So I do a mix of group coaching, one-on-one coaching, and corporate workshops, trainings, that type of thing on those days. And then Fridays I reserve for connection and learning. So any time that I'm doing networking stuff or having lunch with a colleague, or anytime, like I have a learning goal every quarter, and that's the time when I'm doing those sorts of things.
Ooh, can you talk a little bit about your learning goal? I love that.
Yeah. So I try to, it's like, it depends on, sometimes it's personal and sometimes it's business related. Quite often it's business related, but actually your ChatGPT LinkedIn thing came out at just the right time because right now I am in like learn how to use LinkedIn better for the purposes that I have. That's like one of my learning goals. So I'm taking some little online courses, I'm implementing some things, and that will be my quarter goal for this quarter. And then, yeah, sometimes it extends, right? I'm like, oh, there's more to learn here. And other times at the end of the quarter, I pick a new goal, something else that I want to learn about that can help me.
I love that. That's awesome. And then finally, the question that I ask all the coaches that come on is elements of becoming your biggest champion in work, money, and life, which is sort of a weird thing to say. I should probably just say in life, in all aspects. So yeah, for you, what would you say would be that?
Yeah.
Really,
so I think there are 3 big categories. And so the first one is just how do we move from being reactive to being proactive? Because when we're reactive, we feel as though the day has happened to us, right? It's where we wake up, we get on our computer, we have our coffee. All of a sudden it's 6 p.m. and we've crossed nothing off of our to-do list, right? But we've still been working hard all day. We haven't been screwing around. So really moving, and I think we do that through planning and through kind of curation of our task lists, right? The next one is around keeping our own goals front and center. And so I think that it can be so easy, right, to let things come at us and to kind of chip away at the time that we protect for the things that are actually important to us. And so I have a number of ways that I keep track of this stuff, right? I have a quarter-long goals calendar entry. So it just appears at the top of my Google Calendar that has, my 3 quarterly goals. So every time I'm in my calendar, I'm forced to contend with, is this thing I'm about to put on my calendar actually support the goals that sit up there, right? Sometimes people have it as like, make a thing on Canva and make it as the backdrop of your computer, right? What are your goals? What are the things that you're striving towards? And then I think the last one is just to value your whole life, right? We tend in this culture to overvalue work and to undervalue life, right? It's like, if you have a lot of work to do, what's the first thing that goes? Sleep and exercise, family relationships, self-care, all of that stuff. And that's the stuff that makes life worth living, right? I mean, I love what I do. I love it. And I would almost rather be doing something else, right? I would almost rather like always be out of my hammock reading a book or hanging out with my kids or going out to dinner or cooking. Like there's a million things that I would love to be doing that aren't work, even though I absolutely love my work. And I think that what we tend to do is say that, oh, well, when we have time, we'll do those things. And the reality is that we could work 18 hours a day for the rest of our lives and there would still be more work tomorrow. And so we actually have to protect that time now if we ever want it at all.
Right. And also by investing in the basics of the human basics of like sleep and physical exercise, nutrition and connection. And that allows you to not burn out to do your work. So if you do value work, you should actually be doing other things.
Right.
Or not, you don't compete.
Yeah, there's a diminishing, I think there's a study that said after 50 hours of work a week, there's a diminishing returns on output.
Interesting. Huh, okay. Also apps, do you have any recommendations on top apps? I'm sure you have. And by the way, once this is posted, which will be in about a minute and it'll just go, be on all of our channels. If on LinkedIn, you want to comment on this with the links that you think, that help support some of the stuff that you've talked about today, that would be a great way.
Okay, perfect. Yes, so apps, I have reviewed probably 24 task management apps, things like that. And I always come away with my favorite, the one that I recommend to most people. And this is an app called Tick Tick, not TikTok. That is not for our productivity, although it is but not for productivity, but it's called Tick Tick, Tick. And it's a task app that is just very easy to use. It has all the features that you would want without feeling like you have to fill in a million fields. It syncs seamlessly across all your devices, and the free version is really good. So that is the kind of top task app that I would recommend. And then I also have a resource that kind of walks you through how to decide on a task app. So I can put that in the comments on LinkedIn as well.
Fabulous. Love it. And lastly, how people can find you, follow you, and most importantly, pay you.
Yes, thank you. So my website, alexishaselberger.com, is the place for all the info. And I'm also on, the socials at either do more stress less or do.more.stress.less.
Okay, great. This was awesome. I learned so much. Thank you. Thank you. I also think this is the top viewed live. I was looking in the thing and not that it's a competition, but very interesting. It was the most amount of people watching live at a given time that we've done so far. So that definitely says something about the need for this topic and how fantastic you are. So thank you for your work. Thanks to all who watched and commented. And hopefully you have a chance to comment below, Alexis, with those links. I'm sure people will go down a rabbit hole and, get in touch with you. And I'm just excited for people to, start reaching their goals, and not just reaching their goals, but doing it in a way that is truly aligned with, what feels good. That's so important.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. Now go get paid.